I think I have always been pretty stubborn about like, if it isn't exciting to me, I can't stay here. I get just really allergic to staying in things that don't feel like a fit, and in a way that like causes a lot of anxiety for me. So it's better for me to go do some other thing that is like way scarier and way riskier and has no guarantee if that's the thing that's going to light me up, because I've discovered feeling lit up is a necessity for me.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Sense of Self. I'm your host, Dr. Gowri Aragam. Today's guest is Kristen Jones Miller, better known to many of you as KJ. She is the co-founder of Mented Cosmetics, creator and host of the Queen Things podcast, content creator, mom, and soon-to-be author. I've known KJ since college. I didn't know her well, but I knew of her. She was funny, she was talented, and she carried herself in a way that made you pay attention. A few years later, I watched as she built Mented Cosmetics from the ground up, a brand that was genuinely ahead of its time, creating shades of makeup for darker skin tones. I admired her so deeply as a visionary and entrepreneur, and then somewhere along the way, she also became one of my favorite people on the internet. One minute, she was dropping the sharpest and most hilarious pieces of cultural commentary, and the next, she was making my jaw drop with the most effortless vocals. Today, in this conversation, we get to talk about the Kristen behind the KJ. We talk about growing up a middle child in a household that gave her a lot of room to be herself. We also talk about the depression that crept in and had her feeling like a failure, and how the person who came out the other side is someone who has made a decision fully and purposefully to live a life embracing her whole, multidimensional and multi-talented self, not letting other people's boxes limit her. And now she's raising her daughter to do the same. As a heads up, this conversation includes discussion of postpartum depression and suicidal thoughts, which may be distressing for some listeners. If you find yourself experiencing difficult emotions, please consider pausing the episode, coming back to it at another time, and reaching out to a trusted person or a professional. This episode is equal parts deeply moving, hilarious, and inspirational, and I'm hoping it'll get you thinking about your life in the best of ways. So get comfortable and let's get started. Sense of Self is a podcast exploring the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, where those stories come from, and what it looks like to reclaim them. I'm Dr. Gowri Aragam, a psychiatrist, and each week, I sit down with powerhouse women of color to trace their origin stories, explore the moments that shaped them, and uncover the transformations in those narratives that made them more fully themselves. Because when you hear someone else reclaim their future, you start to realize that you can reclaim yours too. And just a quick note before we get started. What you're about to hear is a real honest conversation, but it's not a substitute for mental health care. Our guest came into this conversation on her own terms, sharing only what she chose to share, and has had the support of therapy or coaching either currently or in the past. So welcome, Sense of Self. I love to start these conversations by just asking if you could share your full name and where you grew up.
All right. I am Kristen Jones Miller. I typically go by KJ, and I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, which is where I live now.
Wonderful. I know you're in New York for a bit.
Yeah, I did New York, I did Philly, I did Chicago, I did Boston, but it's nice to be back home.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when did you start going by KJ?
I started going by KJ in high school. I joined our show choir, and one of the seniors in show choir, I was a sophomore, and one of the seniors, like on day 2 or something, was like, Kristen Jones. She's like, I'm going to call you KJ. And it just sort of took off within show choir. She was very cool. And I decided I really liked that. I'd never had a nickname before. So it kind of spread from there within the school. And so when I got to college, I decided like, I'm going to introduce myself as KJ. Like I'm going to now officially adopt this as my name.
Wow. Okay. So for your entire childhood, you were Kristen Jones. When you got to high school, you were KJ. I would love to learn more about kind of your childhood. So growing up in Columbus, kind of what was your family structure even? Did you have siblings and where did you fall in that?
Yeah. So family structure, I have 2 sisters. I have a big sister and a little sister. So I'm the middle child. And, we grew up, I guess, middle class, in the suburbs. We moved to the suburbs when I was 11 or 12. And my dad is a professor at Ohio State, which I now teach at Ohio State. So it's been really fun following in his footsteps. My mom is a doctor. She's retired now, but she was an oncologist, hematologist. And so, I feel like I had a very stable childhood, a very financially secure childhood, which, I feel so privileged that I was able to grow up feeling like the things that I need would always be there. I never had a moment or a day where I thought about, are we going to be able to eat, or are we going to be able to pay this month's mortgage? But it's very different from how my parents grew up. My parents both are from rural Alabama. And, when you're Black and born in the 50s in the Deep South, there are only going to be so many opportunities available to you. So they both worked so hard to get to a place where they could be, upper middle class in America and give those opportunities to me and my sister. So I grew up very stable. We grew up going to church. I was at church 3 times a week minimum, because between Sunday service, between choir practice, there was vacation Bible school. There's always something going on that would just take me back. And then I also was the performer of the family. So I spent a lot of time doing theater, doing dance, singing, various choirs. I was, I think, kind of that quintessential middle child where I just was always trying to get more attention. And so I figured out how to do that, which was by being on stage. And so I've never met a stage I didn't like, because I was definitely the kid in my family who always planned the shows that we would put on when we would have guests come over, adult guests. And then I would make them come out to the sun porch to watch our show and hand them programs as they were seated, and then put on a show. And I did this for everybody. And I grew up thinking I and I alone was putting on the shows for the adults, and then grew up and realized oh, this is a thing a lot of kids did. A lot of kids like to put on shows, and but I thought it was just me. And I thought I came up with the idea. But I would say that I think kind of sums up who I was as Kristen.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that about your parents too, because I think that's such a relevant perspective to have, right? You're saying, hey, I was really privileged. I grew up in this way, but this didn't happen by chance. And I'm just curious if you grew up hearing about how your parents grew up, comparing that to how you grew up at an age when you kind of were able to reflect on that difference and that shift. How did you make sense of that for yourself? And did you ever put a mandate on yourself as to what your responsibility was to your parents and to your family?
Yeah, I think I probably, from a very young age, just understood that there was an expectation that we work hard and do well. And it never felt burdensome to me. I think maybe because I did have an understanding of how hard my parents had worked to achieve what they had achieved and how many obstacles they faced to get to where they were. It didn't feel burdensome. It felt oh, okay, they did it to get us to where we are, and now I get to do it. I'm sort of carrying this torch or whatever.
Yeah.
So it did, in some ways, I guess it did feel like an expectation, but it also felt like a privilege. It felt look what they've done, and now look what you get to do. I think that is something I sort of understood from a pretty young age in a way that just felt inherent, and that has always been the foundation of sort of everything that I've been able to do.
I'm going to just pause there, KJ, for a second, because I really want to just highlight how powerful that is in a very practical way. I work with a lot of people where that exact reframe is so much of what we're working towards, especially with immigrant families, but any family where there's an expectation of what's going to happen. And that expectation is often rooted in past adverse experience, whoever that family is. And so oftentimes this thing that could be really beautiful, the way you're describing, and I think what you're describing is really a mindset that I try and help people towards, including myself. And it's hard. It can be really hard to embody. Yeah. Because it can feel so foreign. Oh, I get to do this. And to take something that felt like a burden and actually make it this exciting, really privileged thing. But I just want to really highlight that because that is a really powerful mindset and a way to look at life and how you're going through life. Because it's a perspective grounded in a lot of gratitude and awareness for what has come and what could be. And the true meaning, I think, of taking something really horrible and transforming it into something really powerful, which I think is what breaking generational trauma cycles is all about. It's a big deal and it's meaningful. So thank you for sharing that. And that's very cool. And your parents seem wonderful. So I see why you're back in Columbus, KJ.
Yeah, they are. They really
so
are.
anyways,
But I will
I don't
say,
feel uncomfortable, but just wanted to share all that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I'm cognizant of the fact that my position as the middle child gives me a different perspective on sort of those expectations and potentially those burdens than my sisters. You know, my older sister is 5 years older than me. And so who knows if my parents were nearly as chill with her as they were with me. I suspect not, you know, like I suspect she maybe did hear a bit more directly about expectations. So I do think most of it is a credit to my parents, but also part of it is like just where I came in the order of things.
Totally.
you know?
Tell me more about kind of what it was like growing up in Columbus. Because I know that experience can also vary in the 1980s.
Yeah. I will say I feel like my childhood was very idyllic. A lot of why I was able to sort of have this idyllic childhood is because I was a bit in a bubble. And I think things politically were not in the same place in like the 90s as they are now. And I wasn't plugged into a lot of the things that were happening politically and from a social movement perspective. I wasn't plugged into that. I was plugged into, you know, my choir and my theater and my dance. And so to me, everything did feel pretty rosy growing up. And I think a lot of that is because I did have the safety net of a dual income household where I didn't have to worry about any of my basic needs. All of my basic needs were met. And so then I got to be the person who cared about choir and theater and getting good grades.
Yeah, which clearly sounds like it was a big goal for them to let you do that and explore yourself at that age. Yeah. And so, you talked a little bit about this show choir experience where you were named or like anointed KJ by the cool senior, if you will.
Yeah.
What was that like? Did you feel like you were a cool kid when you were growing up, or was that anointment, if you will, like proof of it, you know?
Yeah, I never really felt cool. I can tell you that. I never really felt cool. And in fact, I really struggled when I was super young, so call it like elementary school. One of the things I struggled with was my skin tone because I'm a deeper brown and I'm deeper brown just like period, but I'm also a deeper brown than my mom and my sisters. And so I always was sort of like the dark-skinned one. And when I was little, really struggling with feeling like being a bit of the ugly duckling. And people think I'm like not attractive, not cool. So like, what am I going to do about this? I got to do something. I can't just like walk through life with people not wanting to like be with me. So hopefully it's less of a thing now for little kids to like make fun of people for their skin tone, but it was a thing when I was growing up. And it would happen sometimes. And I sort of learned early on, like in elementary school, that like if I could just figure out how to be funny, then people would be laughing with me and like not making fun of me. And so I sort of developed a stronger sense of humor. I think KJ was a part of that as well. And so that was something I figured out how to do early on. And it's funny, I've said this before and like on social media posts and stuff, like I feel like the reason most like extremely beautiful people aren't funny is because they never had to be. But like when you have to be, you figure it out. You know what I mean?
You figure it out.
And I did, and I figured it out. And so I never felt cool, but I did feel like I figured out how to be funny. But yeah, no, cool. I did not feel.
Well, I guess that's actually helpful because I mean, I'm sure all of us can relate to this idea of when this is how you feel. You've kind of shared how you felt, where you're coming from, what your motivation was, what your like survival skill was. In this case, sounds like humor was a big part of that survival skill for, you know, the battles of adolescence. And it sounds like it was a pretty successful and protective survival skill, if you will.
Yeah.
And so it just paints a different picture for what the meaning of KJ could be too, right? But to be name KJ, to take that on by someone who was considered cool and had that status in that way, is kind of like an armor of like, I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm okay in this social setting. And like someone else has deemed me to be okay and has like anointed me as being safe and accepted.
Totally. Like my closest family and friends, a lot of them still call me Kristen. Certainly the people who knew me from home, they mostly still call me Kristen. So certainly my mom and dad and sisters still call me Kristen, and my husband calls me Kristen. And so it does in some ways feel like not a persona. I think I am KJ.
Yeah, exactly.
But it feels like one part of who I am and in some ways like who I decided I wanted to be. But it's not the totality of who I am, because I'm not KJ for everyone. And there are some people for whom, I very much don't want to be KJ. I want to continue to be Kristen because it feels like a bit more intimate and a bit more personal.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that reflection and the honesty there. And I think when you think about KJ as being like that part of you that you were showing up as in certain spaces, now that you look back on it, who is KJ to you? Who is this person that you wanted to be?
I mean, I think she is very confident, and I think she's very driven, and I think she's very persuasive. Like to me, KJ is like the version of myself that I want to be, sort of at all times, and not a lot of the softer stuff and not a lot of the more vulnerable stuff. Most of that feels like Kristen. So I think in that regard, in some ways, KJ is a bit of an armor.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing that. And I think that's highly relatable. It is this thing that is a very natural part of adolescence, is trying on these different ways of being and experimenting with, okay, what's working for me, what's not working for me. It's survival, right? Whether you realize it or not, you're figuring out what you need to do to survive. And often it's later on in life that, you end up reflecting on, wait, was that survival tactic actually helpful, healthy? But I really appreciate kind of that organic sense of how that happened for you and what your journey through that was. So I feel like I have a sense now, KJ, of like who you were as Kristen growing up, kind of just the role you played in your family, how you looked at the world a bit. Moving on to, like your college career and then just kind of professional life, right? Because here you are, here's Kristen, you've been told by your parents that, you're allowed to explore life. You're allowed to do different things. You're allowed to be in choir, but also be good in school, but also be funny, but also, you're just allowed to be multidimensional. It's what it sounds like. Right.
Yeah,
and that was, I think, the privilege that you were describing that you got to experience and embody while you were growing up. And it's always really cool to see how that shows up in adulthood.
Yeah.
How it's, either dimmed for a little bit, how it comes back, how it's always there, just the natural progression of this kind of full embodiment of Kristen / KJ. And so, I just wonder if I'd hear more about, you talked about your husband being the one to call you Kristen still. When did you meet him, and what was that interaction like that allowed for him to see Kristen first?
Yeah. So my husband, his name is Kadar. He was actually the very first friend I made at Harvard. On my very first day, I was there for our orientation program, which was called FAP. It was the freshman arts program. And I'm pretty sure he was like the only other Black kid there. At least he was the first one I saw. And so I just sort of like beelined my way over to him because I didn't know anyone. And I was like, well, you're Black, so I'm going to see if you are interested in talking to me. And he was, and we just sort of hit it off and became fast friends during that, that 1 week period. And it's every single other person there called me KJ. I think maybe with him, I introduced myself as Kristen. And so he was like, okay, so this is Kristen. But then I think when I met everyone else, I remembered like, oh, no, wait. I'm KJ. And so literally not one single other person from FAP called me Kristen, just him. And so then I remember at some point a few weeks into freshman year, like once school had actually started and everyone else was calling me KJ, he like kind of tried it on. He was like, I guess like he called me KJ one day and I was just like, oh no, I don't like that. I don't like that. I'm Kristen to you, And he was like, okay, I didn't really like it that much either.
I like to think that,
he was like trying to fit in with the vibe. And so,
but you were like, something about this feels off. And I think, I like to think that means that you knew, like some part of you knew that this person was extra special. Before you fully knew it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because it took us a while to really figure it out. And by a while, I mean, literally until we didn't start dating until we graduated. So it took us a long time to figure it out. But I do feel like both of us always sort of felt like there was something special there. But it took us a while to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. No, I just like those little signs, right? Early on of like your body telling you, yes, like, just making those associations. And that's really special. And so you're in college, you've met this special person. Who was KJ? Did that persona get even more amplified in that space? So who were you in that time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in some ways, yes, the persona of KJ did get more amplified in college. And I would say especially in business school, because college is you're trying stuff on, you're figuring stuff out. And I was very fortunate that my parents still were just very trusting of like, well, Kristen's going to figure it out, so she's going to do what she's going to do. I majored in philosophy, which I think to a lot of people, they'd be like, now, what is it that you plan to do with a philosophy degree? My parents never once asked me that. They just were like, oh, okay. Like my mom was pre-med. My dad did economics, like very like practical things, and I'm like, I'm a philosophy major. And they were like, that's fine. So I was trying stuff on and figuring stuff out, but I do feel like the KJ persona got a bit more amplified just in the fact that I kind of like came in introducing myself that way. But by the time I got to business school, which was 4 years after I graduated from undergrad, I felt by that point a lot more confident in who I was and in who I kind of was aiming to be, because I got to business school knowing I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And by that point, I had launched a few different businesses, none of which were successful, but I had done the work of, coming up with an idea, fleshing out the idea, building out a website, getting customers, paying customers, so I had done all those little things that you've got to figure out how to do. And you've got to like take a pretty big leap of faith in order to do. So that by the time I got there, I was like, yes, this is the person I want to be. I don't know exactly yet how it's going to work out and what it's going to look like, but I know that about myself. And I didn't have that in college, right? Like I didn't come to college feeling like I know exactly who it is I want to be and what I'm going to do. And, shout out to the people who know that when they're 18, I did not, but by the time I got to business school, I was 26, I think. And I did by that point.
That's still a young age to be able to have figured out what you kind of want to set your path on. And in your case, it was entrepreneurship. And so did you start out as an entrepreneur? Or what was your first job?
Out of college, my first job was I worked at Sears. And I was an analyst turned merchant for Sears. And then I went on to be a merchant for a small like retail startup in New York before I got to business school. So most of my experience pre-business school was in retail. But post-business school, I did go into consulting. But I knew that I was doing that kind of as a holdover until I got to start my own thing.
Yeah. And what about being in that space reminded you that entrepreneurship was the way you wanted to go?
Well, I would say being in business school really reinforced for me that entrepreneurship was what I wanted to do, because you're learning about so many entrepreneurs, so many people at school are pursuing different startups. And by the time I left, was like, oh, I'm going to do it. like I'm going to do it and I'm going to figure it out. And in fact, when I graduated, I started a business my second year called Extensive Salon. which was a mobile hair salon focused on hair extensions. I started it in Boston. And then when I moved to New York, I briefly decided I was going to like try and continue it in New York, and then came to the realization, like, I can't, I've got this full-time job offer that I have now accepted. Like, I'm traveling 4 days a week. This is silly. I can't do both of these things. Even though I really, really wanted to, mostly to prove that like I graduated and I am an entrepreneur. Like I did the thing that I said I was going to do. But I realized like, no, I actually cannot do this. But I did graduate knowing like this is still something I plan to do. Like I'm not going to be in consulting my whole life.
But what I take away from there also, right, is there's certain folks kind of go into something, kind of know why they're doing it. They can keep an eye on that North Star to transition out, and others where it feels like you kind of get stuck in that space because it sort of, you almost forget who you are.
Yeah.
Is the best way I can put it in folks that I've talked to.
Yeah.
Was that at risk of ever happening for you?
I don't think I was ever really at risk for being caught up in the like inertia of like, oh, I'm in this thing, so I'm just going to keep doing this thing. I watched a fair number of my friends from HBS kind of get caught up in that way where, you know, you go into consulting or you join some bank or you join some healthcare startup, whatever it is, and you keep getting promoted. So even though you weren't in love with it when you started and you're still not in love with it now, you're getting better titles, you're getting better salary, as you move up, you're getting more respect. And so that becomes enough. And for some people, it is enough. Like they genuinely enjoy it. But I also watched a number of my friends. It sort of felt like it's not so much that I enjoy it. It's more that like, it's good enough. So I guess I'll just keep doing it. And I think I just have never been interested in good enough. You know, like I think I've always been interested in, well, what is the thing that I'm really excited about? Let me do that. I think I have always been pretty stubborn about like, if it isn't exciting to me, I can't stay here. I get just really allergic to staying in things that don't feel like a fit, and in a way that like causes a lot of anxiety for me. So it's better for me to go do some other thing that is like way scarier and way riskier and has no guarantee if that's the thing that's going to light me up, because I've discovered feeling lit up is a necessity for me. And so I don't think I was ever quite at risk for, the like just going with the flow and losing sight of the thing that I wanted to do.
Telling me that now, I think, holds a whole different perspective on it now after you shared about your family. Because all that kept coming up in my mind is KJ feels like this life and her journey on it is something she gets to do. And there's an excitement behind that getting to do it. And there's a responsibility there in some ways, right? It may not feel like a burden, but there feels like the responsibility of like, hey, I get to do this now. I get to build a life in this way now because my parents got to do it the way they did. And so it's really meaningful, right? How these little threads of meaning that you've created can still show up in these little to big decisions. Does that resonate at all? Or am I kind of making something up?
No, it does. It does resonate. And I do think there is this element of like, no, what I get to do is the thing that lights me up, you know, like not the thing that just sort of gets me by.
And for you, you talked about how you've always saw yourself as maybe like the ugly duckling. You're cognizant of how people were treating you and your skin tone. And then you went on to build a beauty brand.
Yeah.
Right. I know you've talked about sort of the connection between these things in the past, but what felt really important to you and what felt like this was something you got to do to sort of take that experience you had and transform it into something like Mented? And if, for those who don't know what Mented is, if you could just share for a second what Mented is.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mented is short for pigmented, and it's a beauty brand that I launched with a friend of mine and classmate of mine from Harvard Business School. We launched it in 2017, so we just celebrated our 9-year anniversary. And it is a brand that celebrates the beauty of diversity, the beauty of inclusivity. And we started it because she also is a deeper skinned Black woman. We started it because neither of us felt like there were brands really speaking to us, really speaking to our needs as Black women and as brown skinned Black women. And it didn't feel like we were ever being prioritized by existing beauty brands. It sort of felt like we were always an afterthought, never the priority. And we felt like we deserved to be the priority. And so that was really the impetus for the brand. And I feel very lucky that the brand is still around today. A lot of beauty brands that started at the same time as us aren't still around today. Beauty is it's a wonderful industry, but it's a difficult industry. And it's an expensive industry, like expensive to launch different products, expensive to gain market share, expensive to acquire customers. It's not an easy thing to do. So I feel very fortunate and privileged that, Mented is still around. But yeah, I also do connect it to growing up and feeling like I didn't get to be considered beautiful. And part of how I knew that was because when I would go to the CVS or the drugstore and go walk down the makeup aisle, there really weren't any makeup options for me. All of the foundations stopped many shades lighter than me. And in fact, I recall in 8th grade, I was wearing this foundation, some CoverGirl, whatever, that was far too light for me. Partially because I wanted to be lighter skinned, and partially because what else was I supposed to do? That's what was available, And so it does feel just really gratifying to know that for my daughter, when she goes shopping for makeup, she's not going to have that experience because, first of all, hopefully she doesn't go shopping. Hopefully she just comes here to my office and just gets some of the bajillion makeup products I have here that I've developed specifically for her. But, I'm sure she will want to shop. She'll be like, oh, Mom, I want, Fenty Beauty, and that'll be fine. But yeah, she won't have the experience I had. And it feels very gratifying to know that I'm a part of the reason she won't have that experience.
Yeah, which is this is what I was talking about. Talk about paying it forward, right? I don't know if you've asked your parents, but I wonder if that's exactly a thought that your mom had or your dad had about you and your sisters,
Yeah. I think it probably is a thought that they've had.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so, in developing Mented, and there's that kind of very deep, meaningful, also confluence of self, factors for starting it, right? It's always nice when that kind of entrepreneurship combines with this, mission-driven interest and passion, and kind of can build something that is everlasting. But that's not easy, like you're saying, right? To make it everlasting is a feat. I mean, any journey of entrepreneurship is going to make you question yourself. I think that's just part of the process.
Yeah.
It's just a fact of life. And so I would love to learn more about what that experience was like for you, KJ, because this wasn't rose-colored glasses. This was the real world of beauty and trying to make it in the beauty industry. Tell us more about that experience and kind of what some of the challenges that you had.
Yeah, it is just such a roller coaster of a journey, and with such amazingly high highs and such unbelievable lows. One of the high highs was the first year that we were in Oprah's favorite things. Oprah picks all of her favorite things, by the way. She tries every single one, okay? I don't know. I think I kind of knew that, but I don't know if I really thought she was trying each one. No, she tries each one. And the reason I know that is because after she made her final selection, we got on a Zoom with Oprah. I thought I was getting on a Zoom with Oprah's, editor. And I was. That's how the Zoom started. It was with her editor. And I was like, they were like, we've made our decision. Oprah really loves the lipstick. You're going to be in Oprah's favorite things. And we were like, oh my God, blah, 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 blah. Then Oprah joins the Zoom and I lost it. And she's telling me about my lipstick. She's like, Nude La La, in her Oprah way, is the best. And I was like, what? I'm literally on a Zoom with Oprah. Thankfully, I was home at that time for something. Home. I didn't live in Columbus at this point. I lived in Philly. But I was home and my mom was downstairs and I was like, Oprah, I said something about my mom. I was like, when I tell my mom this, she's going to lose it. She's downstairs right now. Oprah was like, well, let me meet mom. So then I got to take my camera down, my laptop down, and my mom got to say hi to Oprah. And of course, my mom wasn't ready. She was just like, Oprah, oh my God, so she was just like,
let me do my hair.
I know. But just like so amazing, right? So that's like one of the super, super high highs. But one of the super, super low lows was the next year I had my daughter and I took full maternity leave. And I told my co-founder, I told my board, I was like, I'm going to take 12 full weeks. And everyone was on board. And I really unplugged. I also went through, postpartum. My daughter, I had preeclampsia. I was in the hospital for like a week after she was born. So it was a tough time. But while I'm on maternity leave, I basically get the call from my co-founder that like, we're going to be out of money in like 3 weeks. Because by the way, I had tried to close our Series A pre-baby and I didn't close it. And then I had the baby and I was like, well, good luck to everybody. Like, I hope we'll make the money stretch. And, when I get back in 12 weeks, then I'll close the round. Well, it turns out I didn't have 12 weeks because we like literally were in a place where we're going to be able to not pay payroll. Yeah. And so I had to, in the midst of caring for my, 8-week-old or however old she was, like quickly find some cash, which I did, basically like took on a quick loan, like to get us over the hump. And then as soon as I got back, went and closed the A. But it was, it's just so stressful, right? So like,
and this is while you had postpartum depression?
Mm-hmm, yeah. So it just was all, and I would say those two events are not outliers. Obviously I wasn't meeting Oprah every day, but I was having very high highs, like raising our first $1 million. That was huge. When we got to like be on the trading floor in New York on TV, that was huge. Like when we got Oprah's Favorite Things the second time, that was huge. Like we were on HSN. So the first time we were live on TV selling our products, that was huge. So we had all of these high highs, but also every time I had to raise a round, terrible. Every time like we were close to running out of cash, particularly in 2023, terrible. And then the worst of it all was when the company almost went bankrupt. And the way I got us out of that one was I sold the company. But that took me about a year. And during that year, I was, just fully depressed and almost to the point where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like make it out of this because it was that bad. And that was all the time, like these super high highs and then these like really dramatic, terrible lows. I don't know that I can say I recommend it to people. Like, it's like, I can only recommend it to you if you feel like you can withstand it and you have to do it, Otherwise I don't know that I can recommend it because it is both wonderful and terrible at the same time. At least that's been my experience. I can't speak for all entrepreneurs. I'm sure some people had a much lovelier, rosier go of it. but my experience was that it was wonderful and terrible all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that sounds familiar, right? In terms of even just what people allude to when they're trying to talk about entrepreneurship. And I really want to talk about in more detail some of these lows because those lows are when you really start to question yourself and what you're doing and why you're doing it and who you are. And to get out of that is not an easy feat because it really feels like reality, right? Hence why I think having that foundation is having some like, light, some North Star can be really important to help keep you oriented to like what's north, what's south, what's east, what's west when it comes to you and also when it comes to the world, right? So I would love if we could just talk a bit more about the postpartum depression that occurred before this crisis when you had to sell the company.
Yes.
Was that the order of operations there? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And the postpartum depression, it kind of just took me by surprise because I had never dealt with any real form of depression. And so I didn't have anything to compare it to. And so in the midst of it, I sort of was like, is this depression? Like I know I don't feel like myself. I didn't really feel like myself for all of pregnancy though either. Right. So I hated being pregnant. That's another story. But I was like, I don't really feel like myself. And it is very hard for me to like see anything happily. It's like, so is this depression, or, or is it something else,
Is this just
so that
motherhood
part
now?
of it.
This is just what life is like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, or is this just life now? And
Mhm.
so I remember when my doctor, it was my OBGYN who wrote the prescription for Zoloft. She's like, let's just try it. We'll do a low dose. Let's just try it. But very cavalier. To me, being on an antidepressant, certainly at the time, was not something to be cavalier about. So for her to just sort of be like, well, let's try it out, I was like, what? And so she wrote, it took me several weeks before I went and filled the prescription, because I was just so scared, and I didn't have a psychiatrist. Obviously, I just had this woman who was not a psychiatrist, and she was so cavalier about it. But what I did have at the time was a therapist, thankfully. And my therapist, who, was not a psychiatrist, so, didn't write prescriptions or anything. When I told her, I was like, yeah, I have this prescription. I don't know if I should fill it. I'm feeling really scared. And she was like, she just sort of kind of talked me through it and was like, listen, at this dose, because it was quite a low dose, she was like, at this dose, if you start to take it and it doesn't feel right, you can always wean off of it. And she was like, I do think it's going to help you. And so eventually I did. But it just was so weird, because because I had never experienced anything like that. I didn't know what was happening. But then when I did finally take it, it just was like a cloud lifted, and I just was like, oh, so I was depressed, because it just sort of answered the question for me, was I? And then I took the medication. It was like,
You're like,
I
yes.
was,
It's
and
something you
it was
laugh about now.
yeah, now I can laugh about it, because I'm so grateful for Zoloft, because it honestly, it wasn't overnight, but it felt pretty close to overnight. One day I didn't feel like myself, and the next day I did, and the next day I was smiling and I was laughing at things, and it just, the fog had lifted. So
Yeah.
it was a scary time, but I'm grateful to have gotten through it.
Yeah, and Zoloft can work very quickly in postpartum depression or medications like that. It's great that it helped you and worked for you despite the rocky start and the kind of fearful start, which was less than ideal. But it sounds like the internal experience you had, right, was one of not feeling like yourself, not being able to experience that joy.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you can remember about that time? And I'm asking you this because I think it is, to your point, this was the first time you'd ever experienced that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you experienced another very low
Yeah.
related to your job. And sometimes being able to track back and recognize some of these feelings can actually be helpful. So I'm just curious if we could talk a bit more about anything else you experienced while you were experiencing that depression that sticks out to you.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I remember, and I remember it more vividly because I've experienced it more recently again, is I am by nature a pretty optimistic person. I am by nature someone who gets excited for the next thing. I'm the person who, when a bad thing is happening, I'm already sort of thinking about here's how I'm going to fix it, or here's when it's going to end, and here's what I'm going to do when I get to the other side. So what I recall about this depression was it's like that part of my brain got turned off, and I didn't have the part that was here's what I'm going to do next. Here's what I'm going to do when this ends. And that I think was very scary, because I know how I am normally. Normally, I know I don't sit in bad times and wallow in them for that long. And so when that part of my brain felt like it wasn't functioning, that was another sort of indicator for me that I recognized more strongly the second time around.
That's actually a really helpful, very specific kind of picture to paint in terms of a drastic shift in your internal experience. Did you recognize that yourself? Because oftentimes the person who's going through it may not recognize it. Did someone else recognize it? And, what allowed you to bring this up to your doctor, I guess?
I think with the postpartum, maybe I recognize it, but I think Kadar did too. I remember he told me, he was like, you're kind of scaring me because I think there was this one moment where trying to remember if I was like holding Kayla at this moment. Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. But he was like talking to me, and it was like, I think he was trying to ask me like, what's wrong? And I was just sort of like staring ahead and not really saying anything. And the thing is, one thing about me is I can talk, okay? And I can describe every feeling that I'm having. And I'm happy to do it, okay? And he knows that. So for him to be trying to talk to me about what I'm feeling, and for me to be saying basically nothing, he was like, yeah, this is scaring me because this isn't you. So I think he sort of recognized like, yeah, there is something very different about you in this moment. But I think the second time around, I was the one who really noticed it. Like, oh yeah, I'm just sort of in this state of constant like grief and turmoil, and I can't see my way out of it. Even when we're doing fun things, it's like I'm doing this fun thing and there's a part of me that's having fun, but there's a big part of me that's just still stuck in the grief of it all. And that is very foreign for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And you said second time around, you're talking about now with Mented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a very helpful, and actually I hear a lot of stories of postpartum depression. And I think what you're describing is, it was really beautiful, I think, kind of capturing of what it can really feel like, and the minutia and the thoughts, the thought patterns that can really get shifted and thwarted, even in folks who had never experienced depression before in their life. And this was very foreign, right?
Yeah.
Which in some ways is a blessing, because it actually allows you to realize that this is something different and this is not you, as opposed to it feeling like an extension of who you feel like you've always been and how you always are. And so you noticed that the second time around when you experienced this depression, can you share a bit more about the context of when that happened?
Yeah, it's 2023. And were you at our reunion? We had a reunion in 2023. What was
No,
it?
I was actually
Our
giving
15
birth.
year?
I
You
was
were
like
giving
literally out, my friend's like, we're at the con, come join us. I'm like, I'm literally pushing.
birth?
have a
That's so
scorpion
funny.
bowl on for me.
Oh,
So no, I was not there. I was not there.
Okay. Well, so I was at our reunion. It was our 15 year, right? That's right. 15-year reunion. And I realized by that point, I've got to sell the company or we're going to go under. And I had actually, right before the reunion, met with the bank that was going to be doing the deal for us. And we had kind of put together the initial package that gets sent out to everybody. Like, hey, here's this company. Here are all the reasons you should buy it. And so I went into the reunion thinking like, I love a plan. And this was our plan to like save the company. And like, I was going to do it. And so I went into the reunion thinking like I'm doing better, but then it was very evident. Something about that reunion made it very evident to me that I was not doing better. And I recall there was this one session it was a 2008 panel, so our class. And it was just a panel of a bunch of, 08ers, all who had different jobs, different whatevers, and all talking about some of the lessons they learned over the last 15 years, so on and so forth. I thought it was a really nice panel. Okay, here's what I remember. Maybe someone else asked a question of the panelists. Now, I was not on the panel, but I decided I was going to answer their question. So I get the microphone and I just talk about how I just feel like such an immense failure. I don't even think the question was about failure, but I just was so deep in it at that moment. And I like started crying. Mind you, all of our classmates are sitting there, okay? And I'm not on the panel. So now, no, I'm just like talking
I actually
about,
forgot that. I forgot you were.
I'm not, okay. I'm literally in the audience with the microphone talking about how much of a failure I am. And now I'm crying. And it's just like, and I remember being like, oh, I am not okay. Like clearly I am not okay. And that feeling just got worse and worse and worse as that year went on, because I just kind of got dragged through the mud by this person who put in an offer for the company, but ended up being basically a con artist. So he put his offer in like July. And from July to December, never closed the deal. Meanwhile, I had a separate offer that I had to turn down because his offer was higher. But he wasn't legit. And he just kind of kept me on this like drip campaign. Meanwhile, I'm like laying people off. At some point, I shut down shipment. So I'm not shipping customers. I'm not shipping retailers. And I'm just watching the whole business like deteriorate and feeling like I can't do anything about it because the way I'm supposed to save it is through this buyer, but this buyer isn't closing the deal. And the whole time my mental state is just getting worse and worse and worse and worse until I get to December and I tell my board, I was like, I literally can't do this anymore. I'm not going to survive if I keep on this path. I was like, I don't think this person's going to close, but if you want to keep extending this with him to see if he gets the deal done, then I'll resign. One of you can be acting CEO and you can get this deal through, but I can't. And thankfully they understood, like I had done every single thing that I could, and they understood in that moment. And in particular, the woman on the board, it was a woman and a man. The man, to be very frank, was kind of useless, but the woman was not. And she understood me to be at my wit's end at that moment and said, okay, so then let's call it. And so we did. We, at that moment decided, all right, so we're going to go down the path of shutting Mented down because this buyer isn't real. It's not going to happen. Like we've done everything we can. But before we shut it down, you've got to reach back out to the people who expressed interest and just confirm they're not interested. And I did. I went back to the second company that had put in an offer, basically Hail Mary, thinking like there's no chance now. Like the company's in far worse straits than it was when I reached out to them 6 months ago.
Sure.
But I reached out and they were still interested. And like, thank God they were still interested. And they closed the deal in like 60 days. And so it was just like a miracle, frankly.
Yeah.
But my mental state over those months just deteriorated to a point where I was like, yeah, I think I'm not going to be able to pull myself out of this one if this continues on. Like I can barely see the light at this point. Yeah. So I'm grateful that I did make it out of it, but it felt like it was by, the skin of my teeth.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, one, again, thank you for sharing that, because I think what also stuck out there is this vulnerability that you're describing, right? And we just had a whole long conversation about how you had been presenting yourself in these spaces kind of as the KJ that was kind of the Kristen without the vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And here you are kind of really being vulnerable in multiple spaces, whether it's, on purpose, by accident, like on the panel or not on the panel. See, I keep forgetting you were on the panel. But truly, right? It's like realizing that you're being vulnerable in these places that you otherwise would never have been, that were quite public, relatively speaking, in front of your class, your former classmates, in front of your board, right? And bringing that into the professional world that you were in, because you were like, there's no other choice here. Again, a survival kind of tactic, right? It's like, it's either I do this and I really show and bear all, or I don't even know what the other option is, right? If not doing that. And I can, like, that can really be a moment where people sometimes describe it as, I can feel like they're almost like breaking open in some ways, right? And it's like these things that you're trying to hide from certain folks, whether on purpose or not. It's just like, I can't hold it anymore. Like it's coming out. It's coming out. Like, here is me. Here's all of me, because there's no other option, right? It's often in those moments that these things collide. And so I'm just curious if for you, while that was happening, if you were aware and if you were like, oh gosh, look how vulnerable I have to be. Did you see that as something that was a failure? Or how did you make sense of being vulnerable in that way to those people?
Honestly, I don't think I saw that as the failure. I saw all of the rest of it as the failure, like getting to a point where I just like had nothing left to give. That did not feel like a failure so much as like you said, survival tactic. Like, I think that's really how it felt in that moment. And I think I was honestly thinking, more. Sorry, I don't want to cry.
It's okay.
But,
no, it's okay. Get a tissue if you need to take a break.
I think I was thinking more about, my daughter in that moment, because I was like, I can't give up, like I can't, like, I'm her mom and she needs a mom. And so if I feel like I'm not going to survive this, then I'm going to be taking a mom away from her. And I was like, and I can't do that. So I was like, so this is what I have to do, like I do think I was thinking about her a bit more than myself in that moment.
Totally. And I think that and please take a break or go get a tissue if you need to, okay, or a glass of water or something. Because I know this is really emotional. And I think you're really embodying what people say when they use that phrase, like using vulnerability as a strength. Because it was like the energy you had to kind of really push you off to kind of do what you had to do.
Yeah.
And I think it was the fuel that that allowed for that to happen to some degree, at least the way that I'm hearing the story now. To your point, and that motivation of your daughter is huge.
Yeah. And yeah, I feel in a lot of ways just like grateful for Kayla. That's my daughter.
Yeah.
Because, grateful that I had her as a reason to pull through.
Yeah. No, I can understand that for sure. And after this happened, right? So did you notice once the sale occurred, once that went through 60 days, again, what a roller coaster, just again, going back to the original premise of like, this is, if you got to do it, do entrepreneurship. But if you don't, choose something else. Right. But after that happened, how did you recover from that? Did you feel like you felt the same, or how did you walk away from that internally?
I did not feel the same, but I did feel almost just like, I almost instantly relieved, because the company wasn't mine anymore. And I loved being an entrepreneur, but I really cannot overstate how happy I was to not be the owner any longer by that point. And it allowed me to get to a place where I could be excited about Mented again. And I am excited about it again, like now continuing to run the brand. Mentally, I'm just like in such a better place. Like I can be the person who's excited about the product launch, who's excited about the creators and influencers we work with, who's excited about my team and watching them develop and evolve and become even better at what it is they do. Like all of the things that I loved before, it's like I get to love them again because I don't have the added pressure of being the owner, But now when I think about like entrepreneurship, I really think about it as it relates to the content that I create.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've become a content creator, which has been a lot of fun and has given me another way to think about entrepreneurship, because it is a way of doing it where the product is kind of myself and my thoughts, and the employees are me. And it also feels like maybe closer to what I've always wanted. Like I've always wanted to be on a stage, and I've always wanted to be performing, and I've always cherished that. And now I sort of get to do that digitally on all these digital stages, but it has just been another thing that has really lit me up and continues to light me up, and is still entrepreneurship in a way. I think about like, what are the things, the expenses that are going to be worth it to grow the business, and all the things that I've had to think about, but now I'm thinking about them just as it relates to like my ideas and the content that I'm putting out there. And for now, that's like been really great for me.
Yeah, no, I love your content. I think that's probably how.
Thank you.
I mean, I love Mented. I've been following you guys since you started back in 2017. I'm always in awe kind of what you choose to share, how you choose to share it. But it's beyond that. There's like a firmness in your voice and your delivery that is very grounding for me as a viewer listening to it. But it always rang very true. And I think that is really so on point what you're saying, right? Bringing that entrepreneurship mindset and the skills that you've learned now to this space. And you're a podcast host, you're a content creator, you continue to be running Mented. And so you're wearing all these different hats. Yeah. And this is that multidimensional Kristen, right? That you never thought was not possible.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe for a moments, in your deepest and darkest days, you couldn't see that light, but it was always something to come back to. And I'm just curious if you had to describe who you are today, what you go by today, and who the person is that you are and who you want to be ongoing.
Yeah. Yeah. I still go by KJ for most people and in most spaces, and Kristen still for my husband and family. But who I am is someone who believes in pursuing all of the things that are interesting to me and saying yes to all of the things that are interesting to me, and not closing myself off, not saying no, and it's funny because I feel like I do wear a lot of hats. I also teach and I love teaching. I'm writing a book, so I'm hoping to add author to my multi-hyphenate title.
Yes.
And it's because I think of a thing that's like, yeah, this is a thing that I kind of want to do. And once I've got that thought, I can't let go. And that for me, I think has proven to be very important. Like very important that I follow through on the things that light me up. That's how I live a lit up life, So that's how I would describe myself, as someone who is constantly looking for the thing that's going to bring more joy, more light, more excitement, more passion, and then pursuing it and kind of telling myself I can do it even when I've never done it and there's no reason to think that I should be able to do it. Kind of leading with, well, but you'll figure it out. And so far I have.
Yeah, I see that, right? And I think that's what's so also really important about this idea of sense of self, because it's exactly that. Like, that is the spirit that I think I always am hoping to be able to help myself with, help other people with, is this idea of like, you can figure it out. These things are ever evolving. Like, you are going to go through these seasons. Like you said, this is temporary and there is going to be something on the other side. And I'm allowed to keep evolving. And I really want to thank you for sharing everything you did today and being so open. So no, thank you. I really appreciate it. I was just curious, as a last question, your parenting style now, in terms of now how you are raising your daughter. Things change, things evolve. What you say now may not be the same next year or even in 5 months.
Right.
But what is your general approach to raising your daughter that you're trying to do really intentionally?
Yeah, I think I am very intentional about letting her discover her passions and follow her whims, because I know how important that's been for me. And she is quite bold and quite tenacious and so smart, and really just like encouraging her to lean into all of those things and to feel good about all of those things. I try not to put my finger on the pulse of her desires, but obviously, because my husband is a performer as well. He's a classically trained opera singer. So we are, theater nerds. And are we hoping that she gets into music and theater? Yes, of course. We're not sports people. However, she's also good at sports. So and that's great too. We're not discouraging it, but that's, our hope is she'll do everything she wants to do, including theater. That's our hope.
And like you said, you can be many things all at once.
Be many things, exactly.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If it moved you, made you think, or made you laugh, please share it with someone you love. And if you want to make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram at senseofself.podcast. That's the easiest way to stay in the loop when new conversations drop. We'll see you next time.